The director says it's a go now. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. My name is Kozitzky, and I will be the lay leader facilitator of today's discussion on being you. And we'll be talking about the shared value of interdependence, and hopefully you've gotten a copy of what that is. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home. Many of us were once too seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that well here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. Whether it's your first time with us or your 100th time, we hope that you'll find here questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. Are there any announcements?
Good morning, I'm Valerie, and I am absolutely delighted to say that our search for an Empress teacher has ended. This is Brittany Langley. She'll be taking over the Empress class, and we are very, very excited and grateful to have her here.
Morning, I'm Sam. A couple of announcements that the board sort of really isn't aware of, but that's okay. Well, what I was directed to do, I reached out to 2 long services and they came out last week to look at things. I was supposed to have gotten estimates Friday, but nothing's come yet. Surprise, surprise. So once that gets done, I'll get that to the board. The other thing is, a couple Sundays ago, I was here spreading salt on the walkways and the power was out. And I noticed that none of the emergency lights work. Surprise, surprise.
Why do you keep looking at me?
Well, I'm just looking in that direction. So I bought a couple of exit sign lights with lights on them. So that'll be helpful, and then some other lights. So I will gradually get that started. Okay, I'm looking at you. I was waiting for criticism. Thank you. How did you do this without having?
Good morning, I'm Irene. Just wanted to remind that next Sunday after service, you'll be running our social justice circle, and I think we can all agree it's prime time, even speaking for myself, for us to not just discuss wonderful social justice topics, but also discuss some action steps that go along with that. I know it really helps me. I thank many of you who have reached out to me with some ideas, so I hope to see a lot of you next Sunday right after service, so thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Erica, and after service, Diane and I are having a fun newspaper fundraiser for the church, and we brought a whole bunch of materials, and you can I'm going to be teaching about a simple card technique to make a green card, or you can make a name tag if you want to, or just fun with paper, and the suggested donation is $10. It'll be after snack time until people get bored, so a couple hours.
Hi, I'm Kay, and I'm a member of the membership committee. We're going to have another 102, sort of a makeup 102. We haven't set the date yet, but you will be hearing from us, anybody who has not been able to attend the 102, and anybody who would like to, we'll make an announcement once we figure out the dates.
Thank you. And I want to, I guess this is a public announcement. I actually want to thank Valerie, there you are, and Sarah Wennick for spearheading, looking at all of the applicants and trying to find, and hers a nursery teacher. I know we're still looking for nursery, but it is yeoman's work that you guys did. So thank you very much for your hard work with that. And Sam, appreciate all of the work. Even though you keep looking at me, you know, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing that we keep our building and grounds safe. So All right, with that, let's move into sort of our service mode. Turn off your electronics if possible, so that you can be present and focused. And we'll start with our chalice lighting. May I have somebody to volunteer to light the chalice? Yeah. Our chalice lighting is by Adina Ganoff. We light this chalice for the earth, of which we are all a part. We pledge to care for what it needs and hold it in our heart. Okay. Our opening words are by Irene Glass and Rebecca Savage. There is a song beneath the soil. 10 million voices raise their call in no human language. Life flows through the tangle of roots, mycelium, microbiota, in crawling, burrowing, tunneling life. The song flows upward through trunks and stems and blades of tender grasses and races out into the air. It is picked up and carried on no human tongues. It is in the footfall of paw and hoof. It hums in the buzz of wings and the fluttering of feathers. It shines on scales and fins and slithering skins. And if we are quiet and pay attention, sometimes we remember that we are part of this song as well, and we have notes to say. The Anthropocene is an experiment. What happens when we humans forget that life around us is part of us? That these lives have no less inherent worth and dignity. How many more singers of the Earth song will go silent forever? Today we are charged to remember, to know that as we live together in community, we are also in community with the silently singing lives in the vast congregation of the Earth as well. The interdependent web of existence is no allegory. It is as real as the heart beating within our chests. We are charged to do what we can to help those who cannot advocate in human language, who cannot scream for help when they are suffering. We have a role to play in softening the blow of the age of humans. We have a voice that can help to shape the world to come. We are so charged in the name of that sacred song, tapestry of life, of which we are a part. Let us remember and then act. So we'll go to our opening hymn, which is number 134, Our World is One World. Feel free to stand if you are willing. back, we have the story for all ages, and Valerie is kind enough to read, to be volatile, to be volatile.
Okay, so.
This one's not. There we go.
So this story is called Who is the Most Important? Before I start, do you have any guesses? Who do you think? On the picture here, on the front, we have this African savanna, and there's a lion, and a gazelle, and some grass and trees. Who do you think is the, yeah, you already said. What do you think, Annie? You think the tree? Any other guesses, Faith? Oh, that's a good answer. Trees make air. Okay, well, let's find out. A lion proudly strutted around a knoll on the savannah, shaking his full mane and loudly declaring to anyone who would hear, "I am the king of the rock. I rule the plains. Everyone respects me because I am the strongest around. Everyone fears me because if I don't like them, I will just eat them." Wish I didn't do that. A gazelle was hiding in a nearby patch of long grass and overheard the lion boasting. As he had observed that the lion had just eaten his fill and would not be likely to attack, the gazelle brazenly walked up to the lion and confronted him. "I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but I must tell you, you carnivores are not the alpha and omega." That's a fancy way of saying you're not the most important thing. "If it weren't for herbivores like us, you wouldn't survive. I would hazard to say that we gazelles are the real kings of the plains." The lion looked stunned at the gazelle. No one had ever challenged him before, nor had they lived long enough to contradict him. But being too full to chase the gazelle, he considered for a moment what the gazelle had proposed. Was it possible that he was dependent on such a humble, lowly creature as a gazelle? So rude. Seeing that he had dumbfounded the lion, the gazelle strolled off, quite pleased with himself. Suddenly, he heard a slightly squeaky voice coming from the ground. Startled, he stopped to listen for where it was coming from. "They're here," the voice squeaked. The gazelle looked down at a small patch of grass by his left hoof. "Sorry, but I can't help overhearing the conversation because I'm just sitting here," remarked the grass. "You say the lion is the king of the plains because you provide him with his energy, but have you ever stopped to consider where you get your energy?" The gazelle, quite taken aback, tilted his head to the side and began to think. "Well, I suppose I get my energy from all the plants I eat." "Precisely," squeaked the grass, even higher. "You wouldn't be able to survive without all those grass, shrubs, and trees to eat. And if you didn't eat us, then the lion wouldn't have anything to eat either." "So that means," said the grass, stretching itself as tall as it could stand, "that we plants are the real reigning kings around here." So you might be right, Amy. In shock, the gazelle slowly wandered off, considering this amazing fact. Was it true? Were plants the most important? Even more so than the graceful gazelle and the mighty lion? The grass sat still and smiled smugly at having stumped the gazelle. As he sat considering the day's conversation, the grass heard a small little cough. "Him," said his neighbor, clearing his throat. The grass turned quickly to look over at a small mushroom that had been busily working away on a dead tree branch. "I'm sorry to butt in," the mushroom began, "but I feel the need to say something here. I know you plants think you're important and all, but I would just like to remind you of who is doing all the cleanup around here. If it weren't for us fungi, you plants wouldn't have any place to grow. And not only that," the mushroom continued, "once we clean up after all you plants and animals, we make the soil so rich that it gives you all the nutrients you need to be worth eating by the gazelle in the first place. So really, if we're talking importance, I would suggest you reevaluate. It's the fungi that are the rulers around here." The grass mulled this over, rather unsure about what he had just heard. This was challenging everything he had ever known about himself. A little less self-assured, he turned his face toward the sun and tried to reassess his identity. Suddenly, he felt a low rumble and looked over to see a stream of water flowing by. The grass pushed his roots slightly deeper toward the water, and the fungus felt its mycelium tingling as the water ran by. Excuse me, the water murmured. I couldn't help overhearing as I was past them. While you were all discussing your importance, I would like to take the time to stop by and remind you how important water is for all of you. Not only do you all need to drink water, but may I remind you of the many other tasks water does? I mean, all those nutrients you speak of, fungus, how do you think they get transported around to other plants and animals? I'm just saying, think about it. Without water, none of you will last very long. Without waiting for a response, the water flowed on. The grass and fungus sat in quiet contemplation, gazing up in the sky. The gazelle and lion, who had walked over for a drink, looked out over the plain in wonder. Could this be? Were they all insignificant compared to the amazing power of water? They passed several quiet minutes staring off into the distance, warmed by the sun shining over the plains, heating the water and the air. Who could possibly say? How could something be the most important of all? After all, was it so important to decide who was best? Maybe they all had a role to play, and each was equally important, so that the cycle of life continued. After a few minutes, the lion turned and nodded to the gazelle, as if in gratitude, and walked back to his knoll. The gazelle bowed low to the grass and headed back to the patch he was grazing on. In the warm breeze, the grass waved to the mushroom before turning back to the sun. The mushroom gave a contented, grateful sigh as its mycelium tingled ever so slightly in the moist soil. Mycelium is kind of like what fungus has instead of roots. It spreads out through the soil. It's a good question. All right, the end. So nobody was the most important in the end, right? All right, you guys, let's sing you out to your class.
Thank you. And now's the time in our service where, yes, we ask for money. We know that your financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May we give in love and hope. Thank you, John.
If you're seeing us for the first time, as always, we are thrilled with your presence. We don't need your money today, but maybe next time.
Thank you all. All right, so let's get into the service. So for those of you who are new, the first Sunday of the month is when we explore as a group what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. What we have done so far this year has been go through each of the shared values that the new shared values that the UUA has declared. What we are now, the one we're discussing now is the shared value of interdependence. A couple of things before I get into it. First of which is, as you read it, and hopefully you got copies of what it is, I don't have a slide. The Reverend Forrest Green, if you read it, probably your knee-jerk reaction is automatically to go, oh, look, we do have a slide on that. Thank you, whoever put that together. That your first knee-jerk reaction is to think conservation, to think about the planet, to think about, right? The Reverend Forrest Green actually said yes, but that is very rate limiting because interdependence is also we as humans around the world. there is that community of which we are interdependent. So this is actually going to be a two-part. So as we go into next month, we're going to focus on the interdependence as it relates to humans working globally, interacting globally, accountability to each other. But for today, we're going to be talking about what we the interdependent web of the greater life web, which includes kind of plants and animals and mycelium and all that sort of stuff. The second thing I want to do is, again, I am not the expert, right? I do not stand or pretend to be. This is meant we learn from each other. So this is meant to be a discussion. I'll ask some important questions and let's learn from each other and what we think about this. But I also need to say that I just returned, I don't know what I was thinking. I just returned from 10 days in Costa Rica. The tour was titled Wildlife and Conservation. And so I saw, I saw 5 ecosystems. I saw a rainforest, cloud forest, a dry forest, I saw the beach. And the thing that was, and it was about what is Costa Rica doing for conservation, right? So I'm very excited about this. How did a country go from #1 in deforestation in 1970 to #1 in reforestation, right? That maybe in the summer, if there's a Sunday, somebody's not doing it, I think would be another cool talk, not a travelogue, but just to understand what they did and is there anything we can learn to say, what can we do to help? So I'm really kind of excited about that. Anyway, let's get into today. So I'm going to start this off with an excerpt from an essay by Anna Lowenhaupt Singh. Making worlds is not limited to humans. We know that beavers reshape streams as they make dams, canals, and lodges. In fact, all organisms make ecological living spaces, altering earth, air, and water. Without the ability to make workable living arrangements, species would die out. In the process, each organism changes everyone's world. Bacteria made our oxygen atmosphere, and plants help maintain it. Plants live on land because fungi make soil by digesting rocks. And these examples suggest world-making projects can overlap, allowing room for more than one species. Humans, too, have always been involved in multi-species world-making. Fire was a tool for early humans, not just to cook, but also to burn the landscape, encouraging edible bulbs and grasses that attracted animals for hunting. Humans shape multi-species worlds when our living arrangements make room for other species. This is not just a matter of crops, livestock, and pets. Pines with their associated fungi partners often flourish in landscapes burned by humans. Pines and fungi work together to take advantage of bright open spaces and exposed mineral soils. Humans, pines, and fungi make living arrangements simultaneously for themselves and for others. It's a multi-species world. So I give that as a backdrop because I think it is important that we frame ourselves into, it's not just humans who are coming in, owning the world and doing whatever it is we do to make way for, us, so we live a comfortable life. Every creature does it. They need to create a living habitat. Question becomes, how do we do it together, right? So I guess the first question that I want to start out with, and again, it's a question, I don't have the answer. Let's talk about the diversity of species, right? Lots of little species just here in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, right? How does the diversity of species within, and let's talk about the Pottstown ecosystem, contribute to resistance and the stability, contribute to resistance and stability in the face of the environmental changes? Why is diversity good? Let's put it that way. Bueller.
Diversity lends itself to less vulnerability. When you have less diversity, there are gaps in the sustainability across the board. And the more additional
species or whatever it is that you're talking about, the more diversity you have, the fewer gaps, so the less vulnerability for the system to fail.
Right. And more opportunity for the system to succeed. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, Ann.
I have a visual of what you just said, which is if you think about an elevator, I would not want to be on an elevator with one cord or two or three. I'd like to be on an elevator that has a bunch of them. And I didn't make that up. I was investing some money a whole long time ago and I wanted to put it all in one place. And that's what my financial planner said. So I give her credit. Kept that for me 25 years.
It applies to money, it applies to planet. One of the things, so it was interesting, one of the rainforests or forests that I was in was considered a new forest. And it was, 40 years ago, it was a coffee plantation. It was cleared, it was meant for growing coffee. And through the Costa Rican efforts of we need to reestablish and allow, nature to take its course, they allowed it to return to forest. And as you are walking through this and you're looking at how many people have been to Costa Rica or have been to a similar type, right? So y'all know what I'm talking about, right? You're walking in these places and you're looking at that. I mean, it's just, you can just go like this and you see 20 different plant species, right? And there's animals all over the place. It's absolutely fascinating. And the question became, what did they do? How did this go from a coffee plantation, which was cleared, to this now what they called a young jungle, young rainforest? And what did man do? What role did man play? You know what the answer was? Nothing. Nothing, right? Mother Nature knew what she was doing. And it's basically against the diversity. So it is, as long as there's a connection, right? So here was the edge to the forest, here was what was cleared. The birds come, all the different birds that eat all the different seeds, right? That come and fly and poop, right? Poop is good. And poop causes plants and poop fertilizes, right? So once those plants started to grow and you've got then some of the other animals, right? So now you've got the plant. They're now starting to come in. And again, what are they eating? They're eating different things and their poop is different. So different things are growing, right? That is sort of, so kind of the converse, right? If there's not diversity, it dies out. But if there is more diversity, it allows it to flourish, right? And I just thought it's like, you know what? Mother Nature knows what she's doing. We just need to get out of the way. Or work with Mother Nature, because there was another situation where part of the problem is, and we have this here, right? So we have a forest sort of type ecosystem, and there's a more technical term than that. But the issue is we've got roads and communities, and what Costa Rica is trying to do is build connected, right? Because the more connected you are, things are going to grow. You'll see you driving down roads and you'll see these green ropes. You know what they are for?
That's the travel across the road.
That's so the monkeys don't have to cross the road. They can climb over. So it's creating connectedness between. So there was another, between two pineapple plantations, there was a bunch of acres that they built there is a hotel, but they wanted to fill in the rest and they wanted to connect it to, so they had these ropes. The only thing that man needed to do to assist this was there were waterways. And the only thing that the humans did was they reintroduced caimans into the waterways, because that is a natural species. The caimans were not just going to come in return. So they did have to, 30 years ago, they went and brought in 6 caimans, and now they've got a healthy, normal caiman population in what is now a forest again. So it's fascinating. It's man working with nature, not against nature. Lori.
I just wanted to say, when I was in Costa Rica, one of the things we got to see was the interdependence, direct interdependence of 2 species on each other. One, I got to hold a big tarantula,
that had been stung by a wasp. The wasp sting the tarantulas, which makes them paralyzed. And then they lay their eggs in the tarantula, which I think kills the tarantula. Yeah, this is called killing a tarantula in the end. But the point is that these two species really depend on each other for their life cycles, just in general. And so that was interesting being solved in Costa Rica. Are there any vegans? Are there any vegans? Do we fix? Okay. After I tell you, you might not. There are a number of vegans who don't eat figs. Does anybody know why? Lori does. Yes, little wasps, little parts, little tiny wasps in the figs. And it's very common. We don't necessarily know they're there, we just consume them. And yes, I still eat them. Yes, I heard that too. Yeah, and it's, if they're true, like I don't eat meat, well, if you're eating a fig, you're eating wasps.
Gee. So the past few years during climate change, I've been noticing what happens when diversity is disrupted, when you don't have one element, for example, water, when we're in a drought, how that affects all the species. I had slugs invade my hot tub today. Why are they here? We're looking for water. Wasps and hornets, same thing. When you disrupt the ecosystem, like they did in Costa Rica, like we're having here with climate change, everything changes and all the species are striving to adapt. Same thing happens with human beings when we disrupt our ecosystems and we destroy diversity like the president is trying to do. You're going to lose the beauty of diversity, what everybody brings to the puzzle, to the pie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Alan.
There's a writer, Aldo Leopold, one of my favorite nature writers, somebody shaking their head. And there are a couple quotes which go along very well with what you say, and what a lot of people have said. He says, a quick quote is, "To keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of an intelligent tinkering." So for the environment, you'll want to keep every cog and wheel. And if you are tinkering, that's the first thing you want to make sure you put it back if you're taking it apart. Another one is, let's see. What I had. Okay, he says, "There can be no doubt that a society rooted in the soil is more stable than one rooted in pavements." There's some more, but I'll.
No, that's true. I mean, pavement, why does Houston flood when all of the hurricanes come through and they have significant flooding? Pavement. The water's got nowhere to go. Linda.
There's one hotel, and I can't remember the country, it might be Thailand, I don't remember. But they built it and they found out that it was in the middle of a elephant pathway. So they decided to have the foyer open. And the elephants tromp through the foyer to get to the other side and then come back, and now this hotel is famous for that. Because people want to stand there and watch the elephants. So it's one way to help them get where they need to go.
Absolutely. Okay.
I think back in the Zoom days during COVID, I did a little thing on Doug Calloway's book, Nature That's Hope. And yeah, it's excellent. Anybody, it's every library has it. Yeah. And the whole premise of it is that you can help the ecology and the environment by in your own backyard, make it like a national park. In other words, native plants, etc. So that my one thought when we're talking about diversity is that if you want native bees, wasps, birds, everything, you need to provide that continuity, so people with their perfect lawns are bad. These lawns are bad, they're sterile. So if you wanna help our diversity and the environment, plant your own yard in native plants, et cetera, so that they can go from one area to the other. So I think a service on that would be.
So that's a beautiful transition. Let me just say this, and I'll get to you, Mary, so let's go into what, we all know in the world, right? Deforestation, pollution, we know the big ones. Let's transition into that. How does Linda living on Hillside Lane in Pottstown, what am I doing? That is disrupting the web. And what can I do differently? So I want y'all thinking about that. So Mary.
Well, actually, that's a great idea. My brother-in-law tried it in Madison prairie grasses. He got a letter. You must cut this down. And he's like, take it all anyway.
You could have it so that you could mow it.
Well, he just was not a happy camper. But I was gonna say, I go back to my first couple of thoughts about the jungle taking over. And those massive cities that the Maya had down in Mesoamerica, and if you fly over the Yucatan, the peninsula, it's flat as a pancake, too, as a piece of land. There are bumps all over it. Every bump is a pyramid. But right now, all you see is green until they did that LiDAR and they found 10,000 buildings around you. And so you see the jungle can take care of itself very, very quickly. But the other one is I'm thinking about my favorite critter, the whales. And how much we learned in that one thing that I did about how they contribute. And just with their dives and what they bring up and stir the ocean up. And how much they create as far as absorbing CO2, what great protectors they are of the environment. And I actually had one time on one of my trips, an hour-long lecture on whale poop. And how nutritious it is and how incredible it is. And one time we were watching one of the humpbacks that was having fun. And every time the humpback would die, the birds that would fall down, the birds would come in and you could see where it had left skin cells and stuff on the water. And the birds would then come in and eat what was ever there. And you could whales travel with their posse. There are always birds with them. They keep
Judy.
I'm Judy McDonald. I came here in 1992, so I guess maybe 8-10 years after that, I used to go to the Wilmington UU church. Then I moved up here and I wasn't driving down there. And so Scott, the old choir director, came up here, was invited for the service, and he brought about 12 people who played musical instruments. And he's a phenomenal music director. So they started out playing a song. And it was some kind of classical music song meant for these 12 people. And one by one, they dropped off. And so at the end of the song, there was only one person playing a musical instrument. And it demonstrated everything about how we need to have all those voices, because the single voice, while it was beautiful, was nothing like this little orchestra that was there. And the other thing I was going to say, talking about diversity, in addition to environmental, last week there was a terrible fire in Jenkintown. This plant in Jenkintown only made the only parts, particular screws and bolts that we need for our Air Force. For some reason, it's the only plant in the United States that makes this stuff. And it was destroyed. For some reason, nobody had a backup plan. And now what are we going to do? Because most of this plant burned down and we have no bolts and no the special parts that are made. They're expensive, but they're made so that airplane wings don't fall off. What we need is diversity in evidence.
Sam.
Sit on 2 acres and we have a lot of trees, so it's small, there's leaves everywhere. In the first year, I kind of bummed everything about that. Then I got to reading and it talked about, don't do that. You need to have your leaves on the ground and trees that fall down. You need to leave those because insects winter over that. And then I looked at something else, another article where she said, don't leave your entire yard covered because that's not good. So you need little spots, so it actually makes my life easier, that I don't have to worry about raining too much. And then with all the winter this winter, there's some there, but not a lot, but I've noticed we have this big, probably about 6-foot tree trunk that I moved from one place to another. And you can see the wasps coming in and out over the summer, so even though I don't like wasps. And then that's gonna help us have 5 fruit trees planted. So I need to be able to have those pollinated, so it's like, okay, I'm kind of learning. I grew up in little small rural towns, but after I met Steph, and I lived in San Francisco for 13 years, so there wasn't a whole lot of knowing about that stuff. So it's actually pretty cool to know that what we do helps the environment in so many different ways. Like sometimes inaction is better than action.
It's interesting, and we learn that Mother Nature knows what she's doing. If a tree falls over, it loses its roots, and it's just kind of, to your point, just leave it there. I've got neighbors, because we also live kind of in the woods, who any tree that looks dead, that thing's coming down. My philosophy is, if the wind blows that way, is it going to hit the house? Because all right, that one I think I want. But the woodpeckers, we've got so many woodpeckers, and why do we have woodpeckers? Because I've got dead trees in the forest, right? And the bugs that are there. So Miranda.
That a healthy forest is around a third of this grant. It should be that.
And is it really dead, or is it just part of that life cycle, which is now just, well, now its role is to decay and to, right, exactly. John.
Well, I'm gonna do the lead in for Chad, because, he's our apiarist. And, he's probably gonna take off this, I suppose, that these are a classic example of the interdependent web, because they are the ones that carry the pollen. And among other things, and we thank them for their honey that we take from them as well. But that's the classic example of which we are now a part here in a local environment. I think Chad had said the mileage that the bees put in terms of he can comment, but they cover a large swath of territory as they meander around doing their hunting for nectar. And I'll pass it on.
That's, I mean, that's why I got obsessed with bees. I was never into bees for the honey. I just love like the interconnectedness of nature. It's so cool. I wrote an article one time and I was reading Henry Thoreau's like early works, and this German immigrant writing out of Pittsburgh did this book review, and Thoreau was writing critically of this guy's book review because it was about a utopia would be man making nature work for us. And we would sit back in a life of leisure and do nothing. And like Henry David Thoreau in his 20s was like railing against that because humans need to be like industrious. But he has this beautiful line where he says beekeeping kind of has nothing to do with honey, it's man directing the sunbeam, which I always love. I have 2 cool books to recommend. One is called Tree Line. Very highly recommend Mary reads Tree Line, but everybody here. It was published during the pandemic. And the author, I think his name is Ben Rollins. He wanted to identify the 7 tree species that live where the poles start. That's why it's called Tree Line, in search of the world's last forest. And those 7 species, he does like a deep dive. So you learn about the biology of them, the chemistry of how they pollinate, but you also learn about their place in indigenous cultures. And you also learn about the transition of the species with the change in climate. It's a really, really interesting read. As like just a little snippet, there's two types of spruce trees that straddle Russia and Alaska. They're like cousins. They used to be one species, but now they're cousin species. And their pollen has a structure in it that causes hydrogen and oxygen to bond. So 90% of the water they suck up from their roots, they aspirate into the atmosphere. And then using the mycelial network, when they need water, they communicate through the mycelial network. They all pollinate at the same time, and they cause rain when they need a drink. It's like, it's unbelievable to think how consequential they are. But very highly recommend that book. And it's also got, it's really fresh. It's from the pandemic. Some of the interviews he couldn't do because he couldn't travel and stuff. Tree Line, Ben Rollins. A second one, like more to the UU, like what do we do about this information? How do we get active? I'm obviously extremely annoying on this topic, when I'm talking to somebody who has talking points along a political line. I think it's really important to keep that conversation going as long as possible until their talking points fall away and they have nothing else to say. And then I like to think that I'm fairly informed in the subject. So like, once their defense mechanism of recitation falls by the wayside, then I can keep going, I can outlast them. But there's a really famous biologist who like coined biodiversity, Edward O. Wilson. His first prominent book was about ants and how unreal ants are, which is an awesome, like 800-page book about ants. But one of his later books is called On Creation. And it starts with this little excerpt. He says, "Dear Pastor, we have not yet met, yet I feel I know you well enough to call you my friend. First of all, we grew up in the same faith. And although I no longer belong to that faith, I am confident that if we met and spoke privately about our deepest beliefs, it would be in the spirit of mutual respect and goodwill. I write to you now for your counsel and help. Let us see if we can, and you are willing, to meet the near side of metaphysics in order to deal with the real world we share. I suggest that we set aside our differences in order to save the creation, with capital T, capital C. The defense of living nature is a universal value. It doesn't rise from, nor does it promote any religious or ideological dogma. Rather, it serves without discrimination the interests of all humanity." So he wrote this book, The Creation, Edward O. Wilson, as a petition growing up. I think he's from Georgia, growing up in a predominantly conservative area. And he's kind of petitioning that side of the aisle to say, like, you don't have a choice to not care about the environment. It's for all humans, all time. And any like political dogma that walks you away from that has to be erring. But it's a really concise essay, but it gives you good talking points when you're dealing with somebody who's just reciting their proxy.
So let's move into, I know that I'm preaching to the choir, shall we say, when it comes to the importance of, we believe in the environment. We talked a little bit about what we can do, like chemicals on lawns are bad. I like my dandelions. My neighbors don't, but I like my dandelions. They're actually pretty flowers. I'm not quite sure why they've gotten such a bad rap. Dead trees, we talked about that. Let's spend a little bit of time though, when we're thinking about our conversation efforts, how do we balance our needs with the needs of the greater web? So I'm going to ask you a question. Part of what I did was we were out at Guanacaste on the beach with Sis, and we're cleaning the beach and we're looking for plastics, right? So the question I'm going to put out to you, plastics, good or bad? I hear it depend. Anybody want to elaborate on the depend?
Plastics are good things.
Huh? Plastics are in depends. Miranda.
Or you have anything done medically, probably you're gonna use plastic.
Yeah, the medical community and a lot of, like implants and things like that, there's some plastics and there's metal, titanium. They didn't just manufacture titanium like titanium came from. So, but back to plastics. It does depend, yes, Diana.
Yes, a lot of medical situations, need plastics. Plastics do come from nature. They're not, we didn't invent them. It is petroleum, but it comes from, but its source is the earth. It is useful in that it can be used over and over and over and over and over again, and therefore reduce the need to consume natural resources. At a voracious rate as we do. So plastics can be helpful to protect other natural resources within reason. And they are incredibly helpful in a medical situation. For that same reason, if they don't have to use glass, they can use plastics if they can be sterilized. And therefore prevent the constant consuming of non-renewable resources. And yes, the disposal of them needs to be carefully tended to, and we need to reuse a lot more than we do, and recycle a lot more than we do, so we are not simply adding more plastics to the landfills. But they are helpful. They are not that's evil, and how dare anybody ever use them. They are necessary in some ways. They are useful to protect other natural resources.
I have the privilege of choice, so I don't have to get plastics because I can afford things that cost more. That I wouldn't want to deny folks that don't. I haven't always had the privilege of choice, so. I wouldn't want to deny folks that don't have that to use for something useful.
Yeah, shipping, right? The costs of things we buy would be much more expensive if they had to ship it in glass versus plastic, which is lighter. I mean, this is the reality. And I'm only posing these questions for us to, because originally when I asked the questions, are plastic bad? Originally it's like, they're bad. It's not that black and white. And that's, as we think about this, if nothing else, and we'll continue the conversation, I want everybody thinking about that we move forward is because, as Diane said, it's, but what do we do with them? If I have to use plastic, am I using it to its full capability? Or am I using a stupid plastic bag that got lost and thrown in the trash, or, right? It's the, what are we doing to dispose of them? John, you had a question.
Well,
Comment.
One is, as we know, there are some plastic that we found in people's brains. It's in their environment, tiny pieces are all around us. That's my first comment. The second is, I've been in medicine long enough that when I first entered medicine, plastic was just coming in. We're still using glass syringes, we're using needles and sharpening them. The SIV bags, the early IV containers were glass with plastic conduits. So if you have an operation, everything that's in the operating room, which used to be laundered, the towels, the gowns, all reusable. They were all laundered and used again and again and again. Now, if you have an operation, you don't want to see what goes into the bin when you're done. Everything the surgeon wears, the nurses wear, are all disposable paper of some sort that's impervious. All the plastic that's used is going to go in the bin. It is unfortunately not going to get recycled. It's going to be hazardous waste. It's got blood on it, and you really can't deal with that. So guess what? Everything in your doctor's office that goes in that red bag or the red thing on the wall, that's all gonna be incinerated. Again, I don't dispute that plastics have their place, but just speaking from a medical point of view, the amount of waste, every time we get a shot, of syringe, all the flu shots we get, all that stuff's going in the bin, it'll be incinerated and it's going forever. Again, in my early days, you had the glass syringes that were kind of, had a plastic interior, they had numbers on them, so you could link them back up again. And they would be sterilized and reused until they expired themselves and where the glass went to, it went to. So just my comment about, unfortunately, the medical field contributes mightily to consumption of these products as a destruction.
Yes.
Had two more. Whoops. Which is.
Yeah.
Sorry. Two more good uses of plastic. One, John mentioned hazardous waste. So hazardous waste landfills, thank goodness, have plastic liners, very good plastic liners. About half of us in this room are wearing glasses. I don't know about you, but mine are not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I would have this permanent bridge in my nose for how heavy those lenses are. The Coke bottles, yeah. So I know how many of us have in our car the bags we take into the grocery store? So a lot of us. How many of us, when we go to purchase paper for our printer, actually buy the paper that's more expensive, but it's made from recycled paper? Less hands, right? So, and also I'm saying, and I'm not pointing fingers, it's just things for us to think about. On one end, we may be very adamant and we're great at recycling. And we know what plastics, 215, right, is being picked up. But if we're not on the other end repurchasing it, we're not creating that cycle. So here's another thing to think about. Let's talk about automobiles, right? You've got your plain old car, you got your hybrid, and now you've got your EV. Is one better than the other for the web?
In my opinion, EV, you're just taking one source and then you go into another source. So instead of polluting the air in your car, now you're plugging it in and you're drawing from the grid, and those power companies are coal rather than still coal, so they're still polluting. So you're just moving the pollution source from one location to another. So a hybrid actually is better, because it uses the braking energy from your brakes to recharge the battery and move your car.
I'll pose one additional thought though. What are we doing to the planet as we're mining those special minerals that are needed for those EV and hybrid batteries?
So lithium is.
That's why the Ukraine, right?
Yeah, right.
We want the mineral rights.
Yeah. Why than other companies and they will have hybrid batteries, because they know lithium's gonna run out.
Yeah. And again, this was not meant to, thank you, this is not meant to point fingers and is there a right or a wrong answer, right? It's more to expand our brains to say it's not just as simple as, because to your point, you're charging that car, where am I getting my electric energy from, right? So there's energy being burned somewhere. So we just need to be informed, and that's all I'm trying to do is make you think. I'm being provocative, and John Price is going to jump out of his seat.
Thinking 50 years, or here, in 50 years, we'll be looking back on gasoline engines as like steam engines. We'll be moving in the direction of hydrogen to get away from EVs. Hydrogen offers some real positive solutions, but there's, it's Hindenburg was full of hydrogen.
And look how well that went.
It comes with a cost, cost and safety. I think we'll eventually move in the direction of hydrogen. How it works.
And yes,
So, one of the concerns I have is, all is general, I think you have to have a term for this, maybe somebody else has, but the idea that you get something cheaper. Consumption sometimes goes up so much that you haven't reduced the total. Right, and so one of the things I think as a society we need to just address structurally is if we all get highly efficient hybrids, everybody just might drive so much more that there's no net benefit. Yeah.
yeah, very, there, thing.
I think we have to accept the fact that we can say things. And that has cost on our environment. I think just a good place to start is just be aware of how much you're consuming. Like, do you really need a new car every 2 years, or can you drive one for 10, 15? Do you really need to, can you buy something in a glass bottle instead of a plastic bottle? Can you buy local, which reduces the amount of shipping and therefore the amount of fossil fuel use and depletion of our air? Just think about it, be mindful of it, consider it. And if you find a way to reduce your cost to the planet, your footprint, then maybe make small changes until and another idea comes along and you do that. But simply trying to live your life in a less consuming way. And don't beat up your neighbor or yourself when you can't be perfect.
Exactly, Mary.
Okay. You just let me in perfectly. Remember way back when, I brought this up twice already, gotten no traction. But I had the app loaded on my phone here, I have done anything. You have to do this in the room, the teeny Bigfoot, which is your Bigfoot being your carbon footprint. And, it's too long to explain here, but it's where you get into groups and you decide what you're gonna cut and how you're gonna cut, and it's kind of a competition, and you win prizes for food cutting. You have to be very wise about how you decide, but anyway, maybe I can try again.
Talk to Mary afterwards if you're interested in something. Thanks, Alan.
I just, this nature writer Edward Abbey, said it and a very brief statement, which gives a sense of, I think, what we're all talking about. He says, I stand for what I stand on.
That's very powerful. I don't want to, okay, if you want
Just
to,
a very quick.
yeah.
I want to share this. Yesterday, I saw a bumper sticker on a Tesla. And it said, I bought my Tesla before Elon went crazy.
Still no excuse. So again, we could spend hours here. I don't want to do that. If nothing else, I hope everybody is thinking more about it versus just, it's not just as simple as plastic's good, plastic's bad, all of that. Really look at your full consumption, right? If you are recycling, are you buying products made from recycling, right? It's think of the whole loop. The only final thing I'll say, and we talked about some things, what can we do differently, is part of what Costa Rica has done is educating their children. The children are learning at an early age the importance of the ecosystems and nature and the world. So now that we have an inverse teacher, I think that's something that we can now embrace as a fellowship. So good discussion. Thank you all for participating. So I'm going to close with a quote or some words from Forrest Gilmore. The shared value of interdependence may be our Unitarian Universalist way of coming to fully embrace something greater than ourselves. The interdependent web, expressed as the spirit of life, the ground of all being, the oneness of all existence, the community forming power, the process of life, the creative force, even God, can help us develop that social understanding of ourselves that we and our culture so desperately need. It is a source of meaning to which we can dedicate our lives. So we'll sing the next hymn, which is We Celebrate the Web of Life. When 75. Now is the time in our service for joy and concerns. We are a caring community. If there is a joy in your heart that you'd like to share, we'd like to share it with you and celebrate it with you. If there is a concern, extinguish our chalice. And we can recite the words. We extinguish this lamp. And I'll leave you with these closing words by Frank Lloyd Wright. I believe in God, only I spell it nature. So thank you all. Coffee time, coffee time. Thank you all for participating.